Well, what's on your mind? I think I'm going to do something that really was not intended by Cleo when he announced this theme and invited me to come. That's because I see in the church bulletin where he put in parentheses, change your thoughts and you change your life. I think that's a very valuable idea and certainly is valid. I'm going to take what he assigned me very literally, what's on your mind, and talk to you frankly about things that are most pressing upon my mind, and I hope that it will be of some benefit to all of you in one way or another. Now, asking what is on someone's mind is rather risky. It's risky to ask it. It is risky to tell it. Normally, I evade telling people what I really think. But I thought, hey, I'm just going to be here one Wednesday night, and unless you commit a crime, I probably will not see you. So I want to just tell you what's been on my mind. When you say to somebody, what's on your mind, you're asking them to reveal something about themselves. It is certainly true that whatsoever a man thinketh, that he is. And so tonight you're going to have a chance not to be lectured to, but a chance to learn more about your speaker. Because what's on my mind is what is important to me. I want to talk to you about two fears of growing old. In Texas, we say it's John Wayne who said it. In California, they say it was Betty Davis. But whoever said it told the truth. Growing old is not for sissies. And I think of myself, and it's hard to believe that I am this old. I sympathize with those who want to be respectful, but do not know how to refer to us who are old and growing older. Even I don't know what term I prefer to describe myself. Let me say I thought the phrase middle age was a terrible phrase, and in some ways a terrible time to go through. But what we call people who are growing old, I don't find very attractive either. Old has the connotation of obsolescence, of being worn out. I have a friend, we were classmates at Abilene, Bob Rowland, who became a dentist. And Bob was an elder in the Missouri Street Church in Baytown. And he worked with me for 5 years in the church at Anahuac, and for about 15 years with me in the church at Galveston. Bob went to a doctor. Bob was having some complaints. And so he went to be examined, and the first words out of the doctor's mouth when they met to consult, these words were, "Mr. Rowland, you are old." I don't know whether the doctor charged the government for making that assessment, but Bob is my age. "Mr. Rowland, you are old." That suggests that we are becoming obsolescent or worn out. And so I don't want to be called old, I'll just tell you that, or elderly. Elderly seems like we're very feeble. I do not like being called a young man. How are you, young man? Seems to be what those who are about to measure my blood pressure or take blood samples or stick a sharp needle in my arm like to say to me. That is offensive to me. It's condescending to me. Sometimes I do not respond when they say, "How are you, young man?" But oftentimes, to be polite, I say, "I'm fine." But inwardly, I am thinking, I am not a young man. I have been a young man. That is when I made the most mistakes of my whole life, was when I was young. I have earned every wrinkle and gray hair, each of which represents the badge of some experience. And so, if anything, do not patronize me by saying, "How are you, young man?" Because, frankly, I am not a young man. I don't even like the euphemisms that we give. For example, I'm not too fond of being called a senior citizen, even if it comes with a discount. Although I must be honest with you, when I saw that there was reserved parking close to the building for seniors, I took advantage of that. The golden years are not endearing to me, and certainly being called elderly or old is not. As Cleo told you, I've made 2 careers simultaneously. After I left the Southwest Church, I went to law school and became a lawyer and have served the church as a preacher all these years that I've been a lawyer. So I have a dual career. I am probably the only Church of Christ preacher who's defending a lot of criminals. From my clients over the years, I have learned a phrase that may be okay. It is a phrase that comes from the younger men in the neighborhood where they live. They refer to certain older men as old school. "Oh, he's old school." It is a term for them of respect and of endearment. And maybe I don't mind that so much. We who are older are not under the delusion that age does not come with its limitations. I think I speak for those who are older when I say that we simply want our right to still have our ambitions, to be active, the right to be in the arena of life and to spend ourselves for a worthy cause. I am probably the oldest lawyer down at the courthouse in trial work. I've made a lot of friends over the years, and many of them will ask me, "When are you going to retire?" That is also an offensive phrase to those of us who are older. This is what I say to them. I still enjoy being in the arena. Being there in the arena, in competition with lawyers who could be my grandchildren. And so, I maintain, at the present time at least, these 2 professions or careers. I wrote a note to myself when I considered the phrase, "What's on your mind?" of what I could say to you to tell you what's on my mind. And what's on my mind is trying to understand my place and service and role in the church at my age. That's on my mind. Cleo told you for 45 years I've been the interim minister at the Broadway Church of Christ in Galveston. It's not that I'm such a good preacher, but because I have always supported myself financially as a lawyer. When they start complaining about my sermons and they start asking how much does the local preacher cost, they decide that my sermons are better than they thought they were. But I know, this is what I've been thinking of for months, there's going to come a time in which I will even say, I don't have the energy to be the interim minister anymore. Trying to understand your place with all the changes that are coming in your life. So that's what I interpreted and how I interpreted the topic that was assigned. What's on your mind? What's on my mind is that there are two fears in growing old. Now, when I say that, I do not refer to the dreads associated with old age as described in the book of Ecclesiastes 12. You are experienced in the Word, and so you will remember what Ecclesiastes 12 says about getting old in poetic language. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark, and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim, when the doors to the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades, when people rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint, when people are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets, when the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags itself along and desire is no longer stirred, then people go to their eternal home and mourners go about the streets. He was very politely and poetically describing the fact that our bodies wear out. And there is much to say when he describes it as the time which brings trouble. To be honest, changes are swift and significant. I'm amazed at how quickly the human body breaks down. Irritating pains become chronic. Death is a frequent visitor to your friends and oftentimes our own families. But while these are fears that are legitimate, and many people may have those fears, those aren't the two fears that I have in my mind that I'm thinking about. The first fear that I have is of being forsaken by God. You might think this is a strange fear to have, but it is a fear that was expressed in the book of Psalms by David. The 71st Psalm speaks of the fear of being cast off and forgotten by God when you're old. Verse 9 and verse 18. Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone. Even when I am old and gray, Do not forsake me, my God. You ask, why should a believer ever have such a fear? Well, it's because in our daily life, older people experience estrangement. They experience prejudice. Ageism is a dreadful malady in the workplace. As you get older, you are made to feel diminished in value even where you have worked. And finally, you feel inadequate and oftentimes useless. Ask any man in his early 50s who has lost his job, who is handed a pink slip from his employer in the company that he served for more than 20 years. Follow him as he is rejected time after time. And he goes away and he realizes it's my age, not my training, not my experience. It's my age. If he gains employment, it will be at a lot less than what he was making before. So we face that in our daily lives. We feel discounted sometimes by people in our community life. Our opinions matter less. When it was thought that the COVID virus was a danger primarily to our older people, you remember when it first started in 2019, and the people who got COVID were older people, and especially people in rest homes, and they died? Many of the politicians urged everyone to remain at work to save the economy, thinking that if only the old people got sick and died, we hadn't lost much. Another reason that we might feel that God might forsake us when we get old is because we lose a sense of our own worth. Now that we can do less, we feel we have less value. From the time that we were children, we realized that our self-esteem and our self-worth depended on what we could contribute and what we could do. Whether it's the little leaguer in athletics, or someone in the choir, or someone in math, value is instilled in the child's mind because of what that child can do. And we are that way all the way from childhood through adulthood. My value and what respect I may have among my fellow lawyers is based on what I have accomplished. And so we can lose a sense of our own worth as we're able to do less and to accomplish less. Even churches can make older members feel less important. My weekly reading includes a magazine which I subscribed to from the start a few years ago. It comes out each week, and it's appropriately named The Week. They had an article and a story about the Grove United Methodist Church in suburban St. Paul, Minnesota. The pastor asked the members over the age of 60 to worship elsewhere for 18 months while that church tried to woo a younger group for the congregation. Needless to say, the older members did not appreciate that suggestion. The pastor explained, Jesus said we are called to reach new people, as if the old people were less than valuable. And so I am not surprised that the psalmist feared that when society decides that you have little worth, that God too may forget him when he is old. That is the fear of old age. Now there's a wonderful answer to Psalm 71. In my Bibles, I have marked in the margin, besides those verses that plead with God not to forsake him when he gets old, the scriptures that are an answer to that fear. Notably, Isaiah 46 and verse 4 says, "Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, I will carry you, I will sustain you, and I will rescue you." One of the problems as you get older, and those physical problems increase, you almost have the need of someone to carry you, to help you, to move or to walk. And so maybe I read this verse in a way that I would not have read it 30 years ago. I see a great blessing when he says, "I have made you, and I will carry you." The writer of Hebrews lifts from the Old Testament this statement: God has said, "Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you." So we can say with confidence, "The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid." And the other verse that I have in the margin, that I've written in the margin of my Bibles by Psalm 71, is Paul's writing in 2 Corinthians 4:16. "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day." That's the first fear. And I know and I keep and I treasure those verses that answer that fear that I've shared with you tonight. What is the second fear that I think about? The second fear is a fear of diminished love for the Lord. On a Sunday in Galveston, the song leader chose a song before communion, "O Sacred Heart, or Sacred Head Now Wounded." That is a hymn written many centuries ago. It was not written for congregational singing, of which we proved dramatically that Sunday. It is a difficult song for a congregation to sing well. And even though the singing on that song before communion that Sunday was just embarrassing, the words of that song spoke to me in a way that I have never forgotten them. The words in that song are these: "Lord, let me never, never outlive my love for Thee." I even have those words written and on piece of notepaper and in my Bible Lord, let me never, never outlive my love for Thee. The thought of outliving one's love for the Lord, I know it happens. I remember my friends when we were young, especially those who were dedicating themselves to preaching, to mission work. We were a wonderful generation filled with love for the Lord and love for His church. You may disagree, but I don't know if we've had a different or a better generation since then. When I was in school, there were groups of young men and women who met and who wanted to commit themselves to being missionaries. And a group went to Brazil, a group went to Austria, a group went to Ireland. Just kids. Of course, I did not see them in that light at the time. But looking back, I see how young and yet how devoted we were. And those who didn't plan to be missionaries were going to devote their lives to the church and to the Lord, and we had great zeal. There have been many decades that have passed. As I have thought about them, something happened to many of them as they crossed over into midlife and later years. Their faith and their devotion to the church and commitment to our Lord declined. Many of them were exceptionally talented and advanced to places and positions in our brotherhood that many of us who were their contemporaries were not privileged to have. Some left the church. Some began preaching for denominations. Many others drifted into a passive membership somewhere in the church. And so the statement, "Let me never, never outlive my love for Thee," is not simply a hypothetical kind of statement. I've seen it happen in so many lives that I knew at one time how zealous they were and committed. But somewhere something went wrong. The most tragic spiritual shipwreck in the Bible, I believe, is Solomon. When he was young, no one loved God more than Solomon. And God loved Solomon and blessed him in very special ways. No one was more devoted to God than Solomon. But I read to you this part of his story from 1 Kings chapter 11. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after other gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. What can possibly cause someone who has such talent and who has such abilities and such zeal to outlive his love for the Lord. I know that each person was a story and is a story within itself. But generally, probably disappointments that have come in life take the edge off that fervor and off that zeal. And these disappointments perhaps not handled as well as they should have been cause disillusionments. That may be one reason. As I think about all those young men and women who stood with me when we were very young and we devoted ourselves to the Lord. Maybe secular success itself has caused some to love the Lord less as they've gotten older. Secular success is a very dangerous thing. I know I chose a profession that is not normally known to attract highly religious people. And fortunately, I was older when I became a lawyer and started working in the field of defense in the criminal courts. But secular success has caused many a person to lose what's real and to lose what's important. Divorce, alcoholism, all of these things combined. You know, the love of this world and the things of this world are really traps for all of us. And love of this world and the things of this world can cause one to outlive his love for the Lord. And so I think about that. And I think I do not want to live so long that I love the Lord less. I hope, if nothing else, that tonight you will take and absorb into your minds the words of that hymn. Lord, let me never, never outlive my love for thee. Maybe it was a hint. Cleo said, if you finish early, don't worry about it. Just quit. I think I am to lead a prayer and then we'll be dismissed from this class.